Well, thank you for coming to join me late in this afternoon. I know that it has been a long day for all of you. I just wanted to start out with, wanted to give you a little bit about my context, even though I was given a very nice introduction. So I worked on both sides of the aisle in some sense. I have been a developer as well as a tester. As you can see, I started my career out here in Hungary, and right now I'm working at a small startup. And I like coming to talk to testing communities. It was my dream, as I mentioned before to my colleagues here before the event, to come and talk in my birth country. So thank you for joining me and giving me the opportunity to be here. Before we get started, I figured I would give you a little definition of what code reviews are in general, because sometimes there are some ambiguity around that. And this slide tries to capture that. And those of you who have done ISTQB certifications, they know that it's in some ways it's a static testing, but I put an asterisk there because nothing prevents you from running somebody else's code, even if it's under review, and I often do that as part of my job. Sometimes it's hard to see the nuances of code review. But you can do it in very different ways, informally, in person. There are some companies where peer or mob programming is quite the rage. So, and usually you have engineers, and sometimes the reviewers can be technical writers. Like at our company, we do that too. So, especially if the code involves changes to user-facing text messages or messages in general. So, why should we care about code reviews in general? And I always try to come back to this, and is that we as testers in general in the software craft, we want to create value, right? And then I believe that code reviews play a critical part in that, and that may or may not be obvious at some point, but I hope that by the end of this presentation you're gonna come away with a few reasons why it is actually a really good idea. One thing I wanted to mention, I'm a huge believer and a big fan of the modern testing movement, and then this is a website. By the way, I have plenty of links in this presentation, and I was told that the slide deck will be available after the site, and I also put together a little page on my personal site with all the links that I have, so don't worry about jotting them down. One other thing that I called out on this slide is that code reviews are not necessarily about the technical part. The soft skills that are really important in a team setting, because we rarely ever work as just individuals and nobody else around us. So just let's keep that in mind. I wanted to walk you through two little case studies that I've been through and be part of. So maybe it gives you some ideas of how code reviews can change and can improve the whole software process in general. I mean, a long time ago but it was to me it was like a very interesting case study. When I worked at some microsystems, I was actually a developer, and then we acquired a small company of about 200 people. At the time, that was small compared to the size of some microsystems with 35,000 employees. And that was just almost like a nightmare from some quality point of view, because that product was selling well, but the code was just made in a rush. It was a startup. And initially, we had a lot of patch release, lots of regressions. We couldn't ramp up new customers quickly because and every time there was a customer reported issue, the core engineering team was interrupted. So, but by the end of it, we were, at a really good spot in some sense that, we slowed down the releases. The developers actually created a very long code review template, and I'll give you some ideas about what that is and how it looked like. But you know, at the end of the day, what really meant is that, you know, these reviews, you know, made it really developers did think about the extent of their changes and not just, you know, cranking out code. That wasn't a measure. You weren't measured by the line of code you produced. We actually had these activities not impact, actually stamped on the fridges in the kitchen so that people understood that, you know, just because you keep yourself busy, that doesn't mean that you're doing the right thing. So that's why I call out build the right it and then build it right. We could also say that, you know, test the right it and then test it right. The process that developers actually went through at the time was all this, and you may think that, oh, this is like a long, arduous process, but it actually, again, created in a much better customer satisfaction, much fewer defects escaping into production, and you know, it just created a template that developers needed to follow. I have a link there, and then again in the slide. So this is just a few items from that template that we use for code reviews. You know, obviously you want to have the summary. You want to explain what kind of alternatives did you consider, because there are many ways to kill a bird. So you can always figure out what the pros and cons of those approaches. What was the summary? What you actually ended up implementing, and you know. Previous presentations you heard about all those cross-cutting concerns, the star abilities that may or may not need to be considered, what kind of tests you implemented, and so on. And not to mention, we also had some sort of section for the release notes. We have been in many places where documentation always falls behind. Well, if you can make that part of the code review or make it part of when you are making the code change, then suddenly you don't have all this backlog of documentation tickets at the end. So our QA team was all over the moon because they had the context whenever changes were made. They didn't have to interrupt developers. Again, as I mentioned, technical writers no longer felt neglected and that they were left out of the process. At ESO, a few years later, that was completely more like an agile shop, and what I kind of wanted to call out, I don't know how well you're familiar with the 2 pizza-sized teams. You know, that's invented by Amazon, and then they figured that that's the most well-suited team size to work together, a cross-functioning team that can feed, you know, 2 pizzas can feed that many people, typically 6, 7 people, but it includes testers, developers, product managers, and so on. So that was our team structure. The other thing I wanted to kind of call out a few things here is that, you know, you may have seen this anti-pattern when you're testing outside the sprint, which is like bad idea. But again, code reviews, the way they helped is that, you know, you don't have to wait until the code is ready, it has been integrated, it has been merged, it's part of the product. You can sit down. In our setting, it was super helpful that we were co-located, the developers with the testers, they were sitting in the cubicle area that they could just reach to somebody else. So most often than not, we were, you know, doing reviews in pairing and then just, you know, doing a body check, walking by, and then, you know, peering through the screen that way. So the other change that we started doing is that, you know, moving, you know, or coaching and getting developers more to do more of their own feature testing, and help the test automation engineers with development skills to create a framework to enable the developers to generate those tests. So I wanted to give just a few advice or a few tips that I've learned along the way from my own experiences through these years, and you know, that are not specific to any kind of context, but maybe it helps you as well. So you know, one of the big mistakes that sometimes you see in the code is when you accuse somebody of doing a bad behavior. So all of our goals, you know, just is to make a better product, right? So if somebody, don't criticize the person, criticize the code. So if you, for example, switch from you know, mess this up to the code is not doesn't seem to do this, then you suddenly change the tone, and so don't make it personal. We also had another big thing on the kitchen fridge side that just remember the enemy's on the outside, right? So you're working together as a team. The goal is again just to get that feedback loop as short as possible with code reviews, so that we can, you know, create better, higher quality code faster. And you know, there are times when, you know, it doesn't matter whether something is in one way or the other. It can be a personal choice. So, you know, focus on the right things, and keep in mind, you know, that it takes time to review the code, so be respectful to the reviewer. And as a person who's asking for a review, an author, you also want to avoid interrupting your reviewers all the time by repeating certain things. And, you know, don't feel bad. Sometimes bugs slip through. That's okay, you know. But I've been in situations where a developer, very senior one, just a week or two ago, was really, really annoyed at some bug. So I told him, I reviewed that code, so why don't you blame me? I mean, that's, you know, it's all a team sport. The other thing that sometimes often people don't realize is that at least in all my profession, I spend more time reading code than writing it. So getting better at it is a good exercise. And then the good thing about it is that writing code is harder than just reading it and understanding it. So it's easy to get into that habit if you don't have those development skills. So a few other tips here coming up on these slides. You know, I hate large code reviews, and you know, it has been shown that if you have more than 400 lines of codes, you will just not be able to grok the content of those code changes, and the quality of the code review is going to drop. You cannot concentrate. Your brain is not capable of doing that. So what can you do when you have more than that? Well, the easiest thing is maybe doing code walkthroughs, or, you know, sitting down with somebody, setting up a session where you can walk through like a larger feature change. Sometimes it's impossible to break it down. And, you know, you can do it in person, Zoom. We have all kinds of things nowadays at our disposal. And, you know, before code reviews, and, you know, when I'm talking about code, I'm not just talking about, you know, some of you may be developing automation code that could be also reviewed, you know, right? Nobody says that only product code can be reviewed. But you know, don't waste somebody else's time, you know, to help them, you know, to help the reviewers to focus on the most important tasks. And then, you know, if you can, you know, run those static analyzers, run those automated tests. You don't have to wait for the code review to, you know, to somebody spot those silly mistakes. Not to mention, you can avoid criticizing stuff that the static analysis can say, because we codify our rules within our teams with just having those commonly accepted rules. So, yep. And again, interruptions. Interruptions are, you may have heard in previous presentations too, they are productivity killers. And then, you know, you may have seen that in some studies they have shown that, you know, after each interruption, it takes at least 20 minutes for you to get back into that flow. And the more you are in that flow, in that mindset where the whole world ceases to exist around you, the better you are, the more quality work you can create. You know, one of those anti-patterns that I call out here is that there are some, especially sometimes junior engineers tend to do that. They request the code review like 15 different times on the same change, and that can drive people bonkers. So try to avoid that. I really like the concept of the checklist, and that template was also one of those examples of what can you do. The other nice thing about sometimes documenting these expectations or creating these templates when somebody else joins your team, right? So it sets, hey, these are the expectations. These are implicitly codified here. Everybody follows that. We are not picking on you because you're new to the team. And sometimes it depends on the kind of code space, back and front end. They may have different kind of rules and different kinds of checklists that you need to go through. This is one of those nice books about checklists, by the way. And sometimes there are exceptions, so it's okay. Rules are not set in stone. It's okay for the team to eventually sometimes review them and change them as needed, as either the business context changes, the team changes, or the product changes. And it's one of those things that how many times did you maybe wanted to tell somebody, hey, I cannot mind meld with you. I need to, that goes both ways. So developers as well as testers. One of the anti-patterns here is that some people ask about code comments and what is right and what is wrong. And once I talked to one of our lead engineers, and he wrote like 5 lines of comments about a single line of if statement. And I told him that if you have to explain it like that, then there is something wrong with the code, right? So it's the code should speak for itself, right? Yeah, but that's it. So just, kind of recapping from different roles point of view, and I hope I'm still on time, is that what is in for you, and then you hear me talking about value, value, value all over this presentation, because at the end of the day, we want to make ourselves valuable to the team, no matter what role we are playing in, because that's, and then you see yourself appreciated in that kind of context, in that, in those activities, that's when you are making an impact. So, that's why I think, for testing specialists, especially if you are what you call a manual tester or kind of learning the code, reading the code is a good way to step or further your career. And again, the other key theme here, sometimes you see me on my slides, is shared understanding. And one of the books I reference at the end is really talks to the heart of it, is that, you are on the same page with everybody else. There is no discrepancy between you and the rest of the team, the product manager, the developer, and so on. And code reviews can help with that too. For developers, and this is also good, especially when there are multiple participants in code reviews, or you have junior developers on the team, is that it's a good way to show good practices, good patterns. We have an intern on our team, and then a few weeks ago he finally realized and learned how to use the decorator pattern for creating some of our tasks, which he did not know before, but it looked beautiful. And then he learned that from looking at somebody else's code review. And at the end of the day, again, for developers too, the value is key, because some people still think that, if I create like 800 lines of code a day, then I'm the superstar. You're not. So I'm telling you. Sometimes people hesitate this, doing code reviews too much, and then, I'm always telling developers, sometimes we have to have this conversation. So what do you prefer doing? Being interrupted because you have to fix your code that you just developed, or you want to work on new features. And then, code reviews help with you focusing on regular work. And of course, leaders, I think code reviews can, create a better performing team. The other is that it gels the team. It creates a good and again, here there's the value to the organization. So yeah, I mean, this is what I kind of wanted you to walk away with. What these are the kind of key takeaways. I think sometimes it's an overlooked aspect of our software development lifecycle. And I have a bunch of resources here, books, podcasts, newsletters that I like. I even have a little template for both the authors and reviewers for code reviews. These are already up on the site, and then hopefully you will, if you need, you will get a chance to see the slide deck as well. So that's it for me. Thank you so much. I really appreciate you listening, and I hope it was helpful for you. Thank you so much.
Okay, we have 3 minutes for questions. And first question was, what can you suggest those people who take the code reviews feedbacks as negative critics, causing serious conflicts inside the team?
Yeah, I mean, that's, yeah. There are, different ways. Again, what I mentioned is that try to use, neutral language. You talk about the code. Hey, this is my understanding, and you can always say that I may have misunderstood the intent here, and that way to approach it, so that the person who is the author of the review doesn't take it personal in the first place. If it doesn't work, you may also ask help from other team members, so that at least you can tell that you have good intent. And then maybe you misunderstood something if you don't feel comfortable approaching that person.
Okay, next question. How to get started with code reviews as a non-coding team member?
Yeah, I think the easiest thing is just to ask a developer, hey, could you please add me to this code review? And then maybe just think about what kind of questions you would ask. And these are not necessarily coding-related questions. You may start looking at the test and then have some vague idea about doing that. Of course, it doesn't mind picking up a programming book in that language and just picking through that. But that way you can start a conversation. And you may not necessarily ask the same question as another developer would do, but you understand what the change is about, you understand what the requirements are, what the user story is about. So you can ask all those questions. How does this address this? How did you test that? So those are the basics to get started.
Thank you. When is the best time to start reviewing code?
I would like to think that, the developer has to be fairly comfortable that they have implemented the intended changes, and that includes, to me, having automated tasks available to prove that it's not just it works on my laptop, because whoever shipped their laptop to a customer, right? So, and you never. So.
And the last would be more like a provocative. So a tester needs to understand code-to-code review, which makes me think a developer can be a better tester and not vice versa. What is your take on that topic?
I think it can go both ways, especially if you are working with, you're a junior tester and reviewing the code of a seasoned development engineer, because you can pick up some patterns from the test automation code or the things that they are looking at. So I like to think that this is a two-way street, but I feel like that, especially what you mentioned at the very beginning, that in the US at least, I see much fewer dedicated test engineer roles, that the testing coach role is understanding or explaining to developers how to do better feature testing themselves, as opposed to you being the gatekeeper, is a way to evolve your career too.